Good morning, everyone. You know, every morning I come down here and get my coffee, and I see my grandparents' picture hanging right here. I got my grandfather and my grandmother, and it reminds me of when my grandfather passed away, some of his last words to me. I'll never forget it. Anyhow, this is the story of my grandparents, so here goes. Man, these stairs are gonna kill me. Anyhow, this is the story of my grandparents, and I know in previous videos I've spoke about my grandfather before, about him serving in the military, and I was named after him. But so my grandparents, Virginia and Gilbert Vargas, those are my mom's parents, and they're incredible people, man. I really love them. They were really incredible. So tell you a little bit more about them. We get into this office here. So Gilbert and Virginia Vargas, that was my grandparents' name. And of course, like I mentioned, I was named after Gilbert, my grandfather, which is my mom's dad. My mom's name was Virginia. Now that lady was incredible. She was an incredible lady. She had the heart of gold. I mean, she was an amazing woman. I love that lady to no end. I mean, there's not a day that doesn't go by I don't think of her. Certain ways, certain habits that I've developed as a grandparent, I'm reminded of her, because there was one habit she had, and I'm not going to call it a habit. There's one thing she had is, anytime somebody was around her, she's always making sure they ate. Did you eat? Are you hungry? Have you eaten yet? Do you want to eat? Just all the time. You showed up to her house, she was cooking something, she was getting ready to cook something, or she had just cooked something. She always made sure we ate. Always. My grandparents, they lived in a small town here in Arizona called El Mirage. It was a nice little town. I mean, I had a couple stores in there, you know, typical town, but they knew my grandmother very well there, my grandfather there. They both were really involved in the church. So everybody who went to church in that town, they knew them, and they gave back to the community a lot. And I mean, what I liked about that town they lived in is when we'd go visit with them, we'd go down to the local markets, and she actually had credit there. Like, they would build credit. You know, it was one of those stores. Like, she would send us to the store, me and my cousins or something. Every once in a while, she would send us to the store and tell, you know, grab this, grab that, whether it was bread, eggs, milk, sausage, bacon, whatever it was at this market. And all we had to tell them was, hey, I'm Virginia's grandson. And okay, and they'd write it on the books for her. And like on Sundays or something, or not Sundays, I'm sorry, I don't know, I can't remember what days it was, but she'd go back and pay off her bill and what have you. And it was cool. It wasn't like I don't know, actually, I don't know if it was because times were hard back in those days and only one person worked. You know, like my grandfather was the only one that worked. So I don't know if it was because times were hard they built credit, or if it was just a trust thing, or just a, hey, I don't know. I really don't know. All I know is when I went in there to ask for things for my grandmother, it was, hey, that's your grandmother. I know you, kid. You ain't got no money on you for this, so your grandmother can come pay me later or something. But it was cool. I liked that. It was pretty cool. A couple of the markets we would go to, one of them, the one market I really remember was called Jan's Market. And the owner of Jan's Market was this gentleman named Doug. It was Doug and his wife, and I believe Jan was his daughter, so they named it after his daughter, Jan's Market. And we'd go there, and they had the pickles on the counter, the pickled sausage, pickled pig's feet, pickled eggs. You know, we'd go in there and just get some candy, get some pickle. I like pickled pig's feet, honestly, so, and the pickled sausage. We'd go and get our snacks, and my grandmother would get beer and go back to the house and hang out there. My grandparents' house was a hangout spot for the weekends. You know, it's like any old typical family back in the day. We used to go down Saturdays, most of the time on Sundays, but if we went on Sundays, it was after church, because they went on church faithfully every Sunday. So That was another thing too. If you stayed the night on Saturday, that was the rules. Like, if you stay the night in Nana's house, you're going to church in the morning because they're waking up going to church. You know how Tata is. Tata's strict about church. You got to go to church with them if you're staying. So it was fun though. We'd go hang out at the church after church, if they had the fiestas like I was saying. But if not, we'd go back to the house, barbecue, hang out. My Tata was always doing something around the house too. He's always tinkering with something, building something. He always had a garden, growing something. Always had animals, whether it was chicken, roosters. I think at one time he even had ostrich. I think he had an ostrich at one time. What the heck is it? Not an ostrich, emu or whatever those things are called. Anyhow, he had one of those real quick. He had a goat, he had sheep, he had a baby calf one time in the yard. He just had different things, and every time he'd have some different animal, he'd build a different corral for them and set it all up. We'd go over there and play with it, whatever. It was fun, good times, really good times at my grandparents' house. One story that I'll tell you guys that sticks out, I'll never forget this story, is one time my grandmother was at my house during the week. She would come visit during the week every once in a while. And my grandmother's neighbor calls my mom's house and says that my grandfather was working on his truck and he had a little bit of an accident, so she called the paramedics and they were on the way to my grandfather's house. So my grandmother, of course, gets all hysterical, so we leave, we take off and go to their house. My mom, my nana, and myself, and my aunt. We had our aunt with us. My grandmother had my aunt with her. I'll tell you about her later. Anyhow, we get to the house. We get to my grandfather's house, and he's sitting there, and his head is just bleeding. It's just busted. So, and this was crazy, is we actually beat the ambulance there. So he's bleeding. What happened? He was working on the truck. He had the truck on a jack, and the jack gave way. The truck fell. Well, the A-arm just happened to catch his head and bust his head open. So the ambulance gets there. They put him in the ambulance and they're taking him. Well, my grandmother and my mom get in the ambulance with him. Well, now it's just me and my aunt. Well, I'm 15 years old at the time. And my aunt, her name is Gloria. My Aunt Gloria is deaf mute. So she doesn't drive, she doesn't speak. My grandmother takes care of her 24/7. So it's up to me to follow the ambulance in the car, in my grandmother's car. Mind you, I'm only 15 years old. I don't have my license. I don't even remember if I really, really knew how to drive then. I think I drove a few times, but nothing major. So here I was, 15 years old. They tell me, follow us in the ambulance. So I get in my Nana's car, and at the time, 69 Nova. At the time, it's just a Nova. But if you know the 69 Novas now, had a little bit of power behind it. So I didn't know that then. It was just a car. It was just a Nova. So anyhow, I get in the car, get my aunt in the car. Let's go. I'm following the ambulance. I'm right behind it. I'm driving right along behind it. And we get to the hospital and I park, and I did it. I drove. I was proud of myself. I was happy. I didn't know whether to be proud of myself, happy, because I was still scared at the same time for my grandfather. Because here, the truck just fell on him, busted his head open, and it's in the back of an ambulance. So I'm worried about him. I'm also worried about my driving. I don't have a license, so it is what it is. We get to that hospital. He gets all stitched up, fixed up. We go home later on, and I drove. And it just so happened to be that a year later, after I turned 16 and I was able to get my license, I asked my Nana if I can use her Nova to get my license, because I had to do that parallel parking, 3-point parking, the whole works for your driving test. Here in Arizona, they make you go through it all. So I ended up doing my test in her Nova and got my driver's license in a 69 Nova. Pretty cool story. I like it. We spent a lot of time with my grandparents. One of the traditions that I still do to this day, as a matter of fact, today's April 2nd, and Easter's coming up. And one tradition they taught us was camping. We camp every Easter. So I've been camping every Easter since I was a kid with my grandparents. And now I do it with my grandkids, and my family, my kids. I showed my kids that tradition, and we still continue to do it, till this day, which is cool. One of those traditions that we carry on from my grandparents, which I'm pretty sure they'd be proud of that. So I mentioned that my Nana would come over to our house during the week every once in a while. And I used to love that because I'd get off of school and I'd be walking home from school and I'd turn the corner and I would see my Nana's car there, the brown Nova. Oh, Nana's there. My Nana, she always had groceries in her car. She was always going to the grocery store, and if it was on sale, she'd buy it. She'd always carry groceries. Now, not just to carry groceries in her car, she would actually drive around to our houses, to my mom's house, to my other aunt's house, even to my brother's house after he got married and moved out. Even, my sister, same thing. She would drive around to all of our houses to see if we need anything and drop off groceries. And she said, oh, here, I got onions. Here, I got tomatoes. I got tortillas. I got an extra package of meat. I got more bread. She was always giving us groceries. And if it wasn't groceries, especially around Christmas time, she'd be bringing us clothes. She would go to Mervyn's and buy up all kinds of Levi's and the 501s, and she'd come to our house and here, buy you guys Levi's. We were always wearing Levi's, and we were always getting groceries from her. That was one thing about my Nana, is she was very giving person. She was very loving, very giving. She was a wonderful woman, man. That lady had a big heart, just a big heart. She would help anybody. She would feed anybody. She would if you needed help, she would help you. It was just like that. I love my Nana. Love her to death. I miss her very much. That lady was wonderful. Yeah, I miss you, Nana. Now, my grandfather, I spoke about him in one of my other videos about me being named after him. So he was a World War II veteran. Came out, started his family, and he actually started, from what I remember, his dad, so like my great-grandfather, my great-great-grandfather. I'm not sure about my third great-great-great-grandfather, but anyhow, they worked in the mines. They used to work in the mines, mining for whatever material they used to mine here in Arizona. And my grandfather worked in the mines, United Metro first, then Tanner Companies, then he retired, and then it became Rinker Materials. And then when it became Rinker Materials, when it was still Tanner Companies, my stepdad started working for the mines with my grandfather, so my grandfather helped him get in. So my stepfather started working for the mines. So my grandfather was working there with my stepdad. Shortly after my grandfather retires, I'm probably confusing the shit out of you guys. So my stepdad worked with my grandfather at the mines for a few years. Then my grandfather retires. Years after my grandfather retires, my stepfather helps me get into the mines. But instead of doing what they did, they had me get into a different department, and I'll get to that later. So anyhow, I now started working for the mines that my grandfather retired from. Well, like I said, in a whole different department. So I worked there for a few years, and then I got the opportunity to move out of that company, doing the same thing, but this time it was going to be for the government. So I took the leap of faith and I left that company and I went and worked for the government. doing the same job. It's just for the government. So that's what I did. And by this time, my grandfather had already been retired. He had already passed. So he had no clue what I was doing. But it's a cool coincidence that I happened to retire from the same industry my grandfather retired from. My stepdad retired already. So I retired from the mining industry. My stepdad retired from the mining industry. My grandfather retired from the mining industry, so on and so forth. So I come from a mining industry background, per se, from my mom's side. Now, my dad's side, like I said in the previous video, I didn't grow up with my biological father, so I don't really know his parents. I knew their names. So my grandmother from my dad's side was named Esperanza, and my grandfather's name is Paul, was named Paul. And I didn't grow up with them, so I didn't know them too well. I know my grandfather was a mechanic, and my grandmother was just a housewife, like most of them were back in the day, just housewives and the husbands work. So I met them a few times. I remember them. I do remember them, but wasn't every weekend. It was maybe, once every couple months that I would see them. And, when my biological father moved away, I for sure didn't see them or didn't really hear from them. So it is what it is. I had plenty of love from my mom's parents, and so those are the grandparents I really adore and I remember, and that's where all my memories are with my Nana, Tata, Virginia, and Gilbert. So their memories will forever be with me. I have a lot of memories, a lot of stories with them. But in the beginning of the video, I said my grandfather told me some of his last words, what he told me, and I'll never forget it. And I have his picture hanging up there. I have his picture down by the fridge when I get coffee every morning. And not just for what he told me, but because I miss them and I always want to remember them. But my grandfather's last words to me before he passed was, and I was hugging him and whatever, and he says, "Hey, Anthony, do me a favor." And I was like, "Yeah, what's that, Tata?" And he says, "Don't ever forget me." It's like, no way, how can I ever forget you? I'm named after you. I do what you did. As far as the mining industry, I'm doing what you did. I'll never forget you. So yeah, those were his last words. Please don't ever forget me. And I haven't, Tata. I haven't forgotten you. Now, I got his portrait tattooed on my back. I got his portrait tattooed not because I want to say, I'll never want, I didn't want to forget him, so I got it just in case I forget. It wasn't because of that. I got his portrait tattooed mainly because, one, he was my grandfather and I love him to death. He taught me a lot. A lot. I'm named after him. But I think one of the main reasons I got his portrait tattooed on me is because I remember what kind of man he was, at a young age, volunteering for the war, volunteering to go to World War II. Him and his brother, he volunteered, that it takes a lot of balls. It takes a lot of balls to leave your family and do that. When I was in high school, I had the opportunity to go to college in Colorado, and I didn't want to do it. I was too scared. I was too scared to leave my family. I was too scared to leave my home, my friends. I was like, no way. I didn't want to do it. And I didn't do it. I regret it now, but I didn't do it. And here he did. He volunteered for the war, left the country, went to fight for this country in another country. So I put that tattoo on my back to remind me when I'm feeling off or low or weak, or you know what? Let me be honest with you. When I'm feeling like a bitch, I look at that portrait on my back and remember what kind of man my grandfather was. And I got to live up to that. I'll never fill his shoes. I know I'll never fill his shoes, but I can't let him look down on me thinking I'm being a little sissy. So when I start to lose strength, start to feel weak, lose hope, what have you, I look at that picture and I just remember where I come from, what kind of man I came from. I've got the same blood in my veins that man has running in his. And I was a strong man, so I got to remain strong. I got to be a good man just like he was. So that's one of the reasons I got a tattoo of him. You know, I know I'll never forget him. But now, when I don't have my shirt on and other people see my tattoo, I'll never forget him either. I'll know who he is. And if they don't, they'll ask, who is that? I'll tell them. Proudly, that's my grandfather. That's Gilbert Vargas. He's from the 76th Infantry Division, World War II. Proud of that, real proud of that. That's why I fly my flag high every day in front of my house. I got the American flag hanging. I don't wait till Flag Day, July 4th, and I don't wait for none of that. That thing flies every day to remind me of the freedom my grandfather earned for us. Every day. So now how can I forget my Tata? I never could. Nope. What he did for this country, what he did for my family, what he did for us. Never forget him. Anyhow, I'm pretty sure in this book I'm going to be talking about my grandparents a lot, my family a lot, so I won't make this too long. The memories of my grandparents will always be with me because I find myself doing a lot of things they did. You know, a lot of the habits my grandmother had, like I told you, she was always feeding us, always giving us groceries. I have the same habit, and I don't even notice it. Just with my granddaughter, you know, when Anna's here, are you hungry? Have you eaten? You want to eat? And sometimes she'll tell me, no. Are you hungry? No, I'm not hungry. And I'll make something to eat anyways just to feed it to her. And I know her smelling it, she's going to want to eat it because that's what used to happen to me. Why not? I'd be like, you want to eat? No, I'm good. I was too busy playing outside, but the minute I smell it, what are you making? Just making whatever. Yeah, I'll have some. So a lot of the things I do as a grandparent, I've learned from them. You know, learn from them. A lot of the little garden stuff I do with my granddaughter, that was my grandfather. Little shed I built, I remember my grandfather building a shed and just having his little tools in there. And I look at my shed and I think of my Tata all the time. Like, I do the same thing. And even to the point where I wear the same boots now. I wear the same boots as my Tata, not even realizing. I just look down like, those are my Tata's boots. Look at that. I look like my grandfather and stuff. Wow. But I took a picture not too long ago and my mom actually got teary-eyed and she said, you look like your Tata in that picture. Made me feel proud, you know, because my grandfather was a handsome man, you know, strong, handsome man. And so for my mom to tell her, you look like your Tata. Yeah. Heck yeah. I'll take it. Anyhow, I think I've done enough ranting about my grandparents, and like I said, I know I'm going to be mentioning them a lot more. I mean, heck, I'm just like them. Seems like everything I remember of them, I'm doing. A lot of things. But to the next one, guys, stay blessed and remember, whatever you're going through could be worse. Could be worse, trust me. Let me go get some more coffee. See you later, guys.